Welcome back to the Product Safety Podcast, brought to you by AMS Consultants, ready for another deep dive. Today, we're tackling the EU's new construction products regulation. But first, a quick reminder.
Yeah, always important.
The content of this podcast is for general information purposes only, and it's not intended as legal or professional advice. Got to get that out there.
Absolutely. Always best to consult with the experts for your specific needs.
Okay, so with that disclaimer out of the way, let's jump right in. This new regulation, CPR EU 23431 day down, it's a bit of a mouthful. What's the big deal? Why should our listeners even care?
Well, the old CPR, it's been in play for a while now, but this new one, it's a complete overhaul. We're talking about a stronger, more unified market for construction products across the entire EU.
Okay, so more than just a little tweak here and there.
Oh, yeah, much more. And a huge focus on sustainability and digitalization in the sector. Big changes coming.
So this could impact a lot of people then, not just the folks, actually out there building things.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. Anyone involved in construction within the European Economic Area. Manufacturers, distributors, architects, designers. The list goes on. Even if you're just someone who cares about, the environmental impact of buildings, this is something you'll want to pay attention to.
Got it. So timelines. When does this all actually kick in?
Officially, the new CPR enters into force on January 7, 2025. But most of the provisions, the really meaty stuff, that's not until January 8, 2026.
Okay, so we've got a little bit of a breathing room.
Exactly. It's a transition period. Everyone needs to use this time to get ready.
Makes sense. Now, one thing I've heard some buzz about are these digital product passports.
Ah,
Can you break those down for us? What are they, and why should our listeners be excited about them?
okay, so imagine this, a passport, but for your building materials. I know, kind of a wild concept. But basically, these digital product passports will provide detailed information about each product, kind of like a digital record.
So like a pedigree.
Exactly. You'll know everything. Performance data, safety information, installation instructions, you name it. Even its carbon footprint.
So no more mystery materials. Oh, that's huge for transparency. We'll know exactly what's gone into our buildings.
Exactly. And that's a game changer, right? Because this level of transparency will help everyone involved to make much more informed choices about sustainable building materials.
I can see that. Architects, builders, even homeowners.
You got it. Everyone. It empowers consumers to make better decisions about their homes.
And I'm guessing this will also be a big help down the line when it comes to recycling and reusing materials.
Absolutely. We have all this information readily available. This is a major step towards a more circular economy in construction. Because it's not just about what goes into a building, right? It's also about what happens to those materials when the building, reaches the end of its life.
Makes sense. Okay, so these digital product passports are a big deal. Now, when it comes to sustainability, it seems like the new CPR really puts that front and center, right?
Oh, 100%. The EU Green Deal wants to make Europe climate neutral by 2050. That's a big goal. And the construction industry is a major player when it comes to, room for improvement.
Right. Huge potential impact there.
Huge. So the new CPR, it tackles this head on. Phased implementation of sustainability requirements. That's the key.
Okay, break it down for us. What's the timeline for all of this?
So starting in January 2026, manufacturers will need to declare the global warming potential, or GWP, for certain products.
The GWP, like a product's carbon footprint score.
Exactly. And obviously, a lower GWP, that means a more environmentally friendly choice. Important for making those decisions about construction projects.
Right, so a good metric to compare different products.
Exactly. Data-driven decisions, which is what we like. Then, in January 2030, the declaration of core sustainability indicators, that becomes mandatory.
Okay, and then finally, by 2032, all sustainability indicators have to be declared. That's a pretty tight timeline, isn't it?
It is. This is a big shift for the whole industry. Some manufacturers, they're already ahead of the curve, but others, well, they're going to need to invest in new technologies and processes to meet these requirements. It'll be a collective effort, for sure.
So all hands on deck.
Absolutely. But the good news is that it is a phased approach. It gives everyone time to adapt.
Right, that's key.
Yeah.
Now, you also mentioned earlier these coexistence periods for different product families and categories.
Right.
How will that actually work in practice?
So once the European Commission, once they make a new harmonized technical specification mandatory for a product, manufacturers will get a 1-year grace period. During that year, they can choose to follow either the new standard or the old one.
I can see how that could be helpful. But won't it also create confusion? I mean, if Some products are made to different standards. How will people know what they're actually getting?
That's a good point. Clear communication and labeling, those are going to be absolutely crucial during this transition period. Industry groups and regulators, they'll all need to work together to make sure everyone understands the changes.
Right, so lots of education and awareness building needed.
For sure.
Okay, so far we've covered digital product passports, sustainability requirements, and these coexistence periods. But there's another piece to this puzzle. The Eurocodes.
Oh, yeah.
For our listeners who might not be familiar, can you give us a quick explanation? What are they and why should we care?
So the Eurocodes, think of them as the rule books for construction design across all of Europe. They set standards for, well, pretty much everything. Structural safety, fire resistance, accessibility, energy performance. And just like the CPR, these Eurocodes, they're getting an upgrade as well. Second generation, in fact.
Eurocodes 2.0, so to speak.
Exactly.
What's new and improved in this second generation?
Well, first of all, they're going to be easier to use and understand.
That's always a good thing.
Right. And more adaptable, more flexible, so they allow for innovation in building design and materials. It's about keeping pace with the industry.
Got it. And I imagine they'll be updated to include the latest advancements in, construction technology and all of that.
Absolutely. The latest research, best practices. Things like climate change, energy efficiency, the circular economy, it's all in there. For example, there are new requirements for assessing, reusing, and even retrofitting existing structures.
Interesting. So taking a more holistic approach, thinking about the lifespan of the building, not just the initial construction.
Precisely. And there's even a brand new Eurocode specifically for structural glass, reflecting the growing use of that material in modern architecture.
Wow, structural glass. Now that sounds pretty futuristic.
It is. There are also tons of advancements in things like fiber polymer composites and tension membrane structures. Incredible strength and so lightweight.
Okay, so lots of really cutting-edge developments being incorporated.
Lots. And it's all about creating safer, more sustainable buildings that can withstand, whatever the future throws at them, climate change, you name it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, when do these new Eurocodes actually come into effect?
Same timeline as the new CPR. They enter into force on January 7, 2025, with most provisions applying from January 8, 2026. Busy year.
Definitely. A lot happening at the same time.
Yep. And then by March 30, 2026, the definitive text is locked in.
Okay, so that's the final deadline. Lots for construction professionals to get their heads around. We've covered digital product passports, sustainability, updated Eurocodes. Anything else super important about this new CPR that our listeners need to know?
One more thing, yes. CE marking.
Ah, yes, that little symbol you see everywhere means a product meets EU safety, health, and environmental standards, right? I always look for that.
Great point. And yeah, it's mandatory for a ton of construction products sold in the EU.
Right.
But what's cool about the new CPR is that it allows for voluntary CE marking, even for products that aren't covered by, a specific harmonized standard yet.
So even if a product is using, say, some super cutting-edge tech or material that doesn't have a standard yet, the manufacturer can still get that seal of approval.
You got it. This is done through something called the European Organization for Technical Assessment, or EOTA.
Okay, so walk us through that. How does the manufacturer actually get that voluntary CE marking through the EOTA?
They need to get a European Technical Assessment, or ETA. This is issued by a technical assessment body, or TTA. These bodies are designated for specific product areas.
So a way for innovative products to enter the market, but still ensuring they meet high standards.
Right. It encourages innovation while still maintaining that consumer trust and confidence. So for our listeners, it means that if you're looking for a truly innovative product, you can have confidence in the ones that have gone the extra mile to get that voluntary CE marking.
Good to know. Okay, so I think in this first part of our deep dive, we've covered a lot. Digital product passports, sustainability, Eurocodes, voluntary CE marking. We just scratched the surface, but hopefully this gives our listeners a good understanding of, the key changes that are coming down the pipeline.
I agree. It's about seeing how these changes will really shape the future of construction in the EU and beyond, really.
Absolutely. Now we're going to take a quick break, but be sure to join us for part 2 of this deep dive, where we'll get even deeper into the implications of this new CPR. We'll be back in a flash.
In this first part, we've talked a lot about manufacturers and how they're impacted by the new CPR.
Right, right.
But it's not just them.
No, definitely not. It's not just about the companies that are, actually making the products. It's the whole supply chain.
Exactly.
Importers, distributors, even the retailers who sell these products.
Everyone, yeah. They all need to be aware of these new requirements and make sure they're handling products that comply.
So understanding the labeling, the documentation,
Yeah.
making sure their suppliers are up to speed, it's a lot.
It is. And they may even need to adjust, their logistics, their inventory management.
Wow. Sounds like a pretty massive undertaking.
It is, for sure. Especially for businesses that, operate across borders, things can get complicated.
Right, dealing with different national interpretations and all of that.
Exactly. But the good news is that there's help out there. There are resources to help businesses navigate this whole transition.
Yeah.
The European Commission has a ton of info on their website.
Okay, good to know.
And industry associations, they're stepping up too, providing guidance and support to their members.
So it sounds like, despite the challenges, there is this sense of everyone working together to try to make this transition as smooth as possible.
Oh, yeah, definitely a collaborative effort.
Now, zooming out a bit,
Yeah.
how does this new CPR actually fit into the EU's, overall policy goals?
Well, as we mentioned before, the new CPR is a key part of the EU Green Deal, which aims to make Europe climate neutral by 2050. Big, ambitious goal.
It is.
And the construction sector? Well, it's a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, so these regulations, they're really trying to steer things in a more sustainable direction.
Right. Change the game a bit.
Exactly. Encourage environmentally friendly materials, promote energy efficiency in buildings. It's about a more circular economy approach where waste is minimized and resources are reused whenever possible.
This circular economy concept, we hear it everywhere, but how does that specifically apply to, the construction world?
So instead of treating buildings like they're disposable,
Right.
we start thinking about them more like cars, repair them, reuse parts, recycle materials at the end of their life. It all adds up.
So a more holistic, sustainable approach.
Right, the whole life cycle of a building. And the new CPR, it encourages this in several ways. For example, the digital product passports, they'll provide a really detailed history of the materials in a building, which makes it easier to reuse and recycle them later on. And the sustainability requirements, those encourage manufacturers to use recycled content and design products that can be easily disassembled and reused. It's about shifting our mindset.
I like that. It's a powerful concept. And I think it's going to lead to some really cool innovation in the construction industry.
Oh, absolutely. We're already seeing so many exciting developments, modular construction, prefabricated buildings. All of these really go hand in hand with this idea of a circular economy.
You do.
Yeah.
Because they allow for more efficient use of materials, less waste.
Exactly. So I think the new CPR will actually speed up the adoption of these innovative construction methods.
Interesting. So kind of a catalyst for positive change.
I think so, yeah. By setting clear standards and encouraging sustainable practices, it's creating a supportive framework for all this innovation to happen.
Yeah.
It'll be fun to see how the industry evolves.
Speaking of evolution, let's talk about enforcement.
Ah.
How will this new CPR actually be, enforced across the EU, all these different countries?
Yeah, that's a big question. So each member state, they're responsible for enforcing the regulations within their own borders. But the European Commission, they also play a role. They're monitoring the implementation, making sure everyone's on the same page, providing guidance.
So the shared responsibility.
It is, for sure. Both national and EU-level bodies working together.
Now, whenever you have new regulations, there are always challenges, right? Pushback, maybe even some criticism. Have you seen any of that with the new CPR?
Oh, yeah, of course. There are always concerns when new regulations come into play, especially when it comes to costs.
That's understandable.
Yeah, some businesses, especially smaller ones, they worry about the cost of compliance, having to adapt to new standards, invest in new technologies. It can be a lot.
Especially for those with limited resources.
Right, and it can be complex. The regulations, the procedures. Some businesses find it all a bit overwhelming, to be honest. They worry about the administrative burden, making mistakes.
So a bit of anxiety around all these changes. But the EU and national authorities, they're providing support to help navigate all of this.
Oh, absolutely. There are tons of resources out there, guidance documents, webinars, workshops, all designed to help businesses understand the new requirements. And, the key is for businesses to be proactive, to actually seek out that information, plan ahead.
Right, so communication is key.
For sure.
Now, some critics argue that all these new regulations could stifle innovation. Too many restrictions. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good point, and it's a tricky balance. The goal is to create a framework that ensures safety and sustainability, but without, crushing creativity and innovation.
Yeah.
And I think the new CPR, it tries to do that by providing flexibility, pathways for innovative products to still enter the market, like the voluntary CE marking we talked about earlier.
Right. So it's about finding that sweet spot between regulation and innovation.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, I think most people would agree that having clear standards, promoting sustainability, those are good things.
Oh, absolutely. The new CPR, it's pushing the industry in the right direction, a more sustainable, transparent, digitally driven sector. It's a win-win, really.
I see what you mean. A more responsible and forward-thinking industry overall.
That's it. And it's setting a new standard for construction, not just in the EU, but globally. People are watching.
Interesting. Okay, so I think in this part two, we've covered a lot. The impact on the entire supply chain, the EU's broader goals, how this will be enforced, and of course, some of the challenges that come with any big change.
We have.
This new CPR, it's a big deal. It's going to impact your work, your businesses, even the buildings you live and work in.
It will, for sure.
We've just scratched the surface, but hopefully this is giving you a good foundation.
A starting point.
Exactly. Now, in the final part of this episode, we'll be looking ahead, exploring what's next for construction of the EU, all the exciting possibilities.
We will. The emerging trends, the potential opportunities, how this new CPR might shape things for years to come. It's going to be great.
Welcome back to the Product Safety Podcast. We've spent this episode diving deep into the EU's new construction products regulation, and now it's time to look ahead. What's next? What's the long-term vision here, and how will this new CPR shape the future of the construction industry in the EU?
Well, I think it's a really exciting time to be having this conversation. This new CPR, it's like a launch pad. It's propelling the sector towards a future that is more sustainable, more transparent, more digitally driven. And it's not just about, checking boxes and complying with rules. It's a fundamental transformation.
Okay, so more than just tweaking things around the edges, we're talking about a whole new way of thinking about construction, right?
Exactly. And I think one major shift we're going to see is a much greater emphasis on the entire life cycle of buildings. So it's not just about the construction phase anymore. It's also about what happens to materials at the end of a building's life.
Right, so we're moving away from that old model of build it, use it, demolish it.
Precisely. This new CPR, with its focus on reuse and recycling, it's really pushing the industry towards that circular economy model, thinking about the environmental impact of materials from the very beginning to the very end, and even beyond.
Right, it's like how we think about cars now. We repair them, reuse parts, recycle materials to extend their lifespan.
A great analogy.
So how do you see all of this impacting, innovation in the construction industry?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting, I think. We're already seeing all sorts of cool new developments in building designs, new materials, even new demolition and waste management techniques. Think about 3D printed houses made from recycled plastic, or buildings that are specifically designed for easy disassembly and repurposing of components. I mean, the possibilities are pretty much endless.
Those are amazing examples. It really does feel like the construction industry is, on the verge of a technological revolution.
It really does. And this new CPR, it's going to be a key driver in that revolution. By setting clear standards and promoting sustainable practices, it provides that framework for innovation to actually flourish.
Right, so it's setting the stage, and now it's up to the industry to, step up and perform. Speaking of stepping up, one trend I've been hearing a lot about is prefabrication and modular building.
Yeah.
How does that fit into all of this?
Well, prefabrication is a perfect example of how innovation and sustainability can really go hand in hand. Imagine building components that are manufactured off-site in a factory setting. So you have that precise quality control, minimal waste, and then these components are transported to the construction site and basically assembled like building blocks. It's so much faster, more efficient, and you often end up with a higher quality building in the end.
I can see the appeal. Less time, less waste, better quality. What's not to like?
Exactly. And it aligns perfectly with the goals of the new CPR. The digitalization aspect of the CPR can help streamline the design and production of those prefabricated components. And the sustainability focus, well, that encourages the use of environmentally friendly materials and processes in the manufacturing.
So the new CPR could be a real catalyst for the wider adoption of prefabrication.
I think so. It provides that supportive regulatory environment, which is what's needed for this kind of innovative approach to construction to really thrive.
Now, when we talk about innovation in construction, we can't forget about contact construction technology. What role does contact play in all of this?
Oh, contact is huge. It's revolutionizing everything. The way we design, build, and manage our built environment, building information modeling or BIM, that allows for 3D visualization, real-time collaboration on projects.
Yeah.
Then you have drones for site inspections, robots laying bricks. It's incredible.
It's like taking construction from blueprints and hard hats to this whole new level of, digital sophistication.
Exactly. And the new CPR, it's going to accelerate this transformation, I think. The data infrastructure created by those digital product passports, that's going to be a gold mine for contact applications. It means better decision making, optimized material usage, streamlined processes, all throughout the building's life cycle.
So the CPR and contact are, in a way, working together to really push the boundaries of what's possible in construction. It's exciting.
It is, I agree. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. It's easy to get bogged down in all the technical details of these regulations, but it's important to remember what this is really all about. It's about creating a better built environment for everyone.
That's a great point. It's about safer buildings, more sustainable buildings, more resilient buildings, creating spaces that are healthy, energy efficient, adaptable to the challenges we're facing.
Exactly. Ensuring that the construction industry contributes to a circular economy, minimizing waste, maximizing resources, ultimately building a more sustainable future.
Well said. Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the EU's new construction products regulation. It's been quite a journey,
It has.
exploring all the ins and outs of this new regulation, what it means for the future of construction. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about this stuff.
And to our listeners, thank you for sticking with us through this deep dive. Remember, this is just the beginning. It's up to all of us to embrace these changes, drive innovation, and build a better future brick by digital brick, as they say.
I love that.
And that's a wrap on the Product Safety Podcast.
Thanks for listening.